Hey guys, this is the second to the last audio tape lecture that you will hear from me. And as you can see from the title, this presentation will discuss landmark legislations that champion the rights of women. So when we talk about legislations, I am pertaining to laws, declarations, or Magna Cartas that champion the rights of women. After discussing the so many manifestations of gender-based violence, not only in the Philippines but across the world, followed by violence rooted in tradition with the case of female genital mutilation, and then some reproductive health and sexuality education. Tapos sinundan natin yan ng mga contemporary gender issues, no? Where we talked about misogyny, sexism, hate crimes against LGBT. We also talked about machismo and Marianismo. This presentation will give naman a legal light on everything that we're talking about, especially with regards to women. Women's rights are enshrined and embedded in these four areas: core international human rights, International Bill of Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and Article 3, Bill of Rights in the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So it's basically integrated and embedded in all these declarations. Championing women's rights has always been a collective international and national undertaking. The following are the legislations, laws, and Magna Cartas covered in this presentation. Let's talk about the first one, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW. This is a fruit of a 30-year labor by the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. The three dimensions of CEDAW 1979 are civil rights and legal status, reproductive rights, and impact of cultural factors on women. Among the international human rights treaties, the Convention takes an important place in bringing the female half of humanity into the focus of human rights concerns. The spirit of Convention is rooted in the goals of the UN to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women. The present document spells out the meaning of equality and how it can be achieved. In so doing, the Convention establishes not only an international Bill of Rights for women, but also an agenda for action by countries to guarantee the enjoyment of those rights. The UN Convention on the Elimination is monitored by the Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. This committee is composed of 23 experts nominated by their governments and elected by the state parties as individuals of high moral standing and competence in the field covered by the convention. So take note, the CEDAW must be or should be implemented by the state parties who signed in the document. So states ang participants, ang mananagot, ang nagpirma, kaya state ang magpapatupad, magpapasa ng mga batas para maisakatuparan yung mga principles and fundamental statements na inilahad dito sa CEDAW. At least every 4 years, the state parties are expected to submit a national report to the committee indicating the measures they have adopted to give effect to the provisions of the convention during its annual session. So, states din ang magre-report sa UN. In other words, it is the state who must implement or who will implement the principles and the Bill of Rights of Women in the country set up. This is an excerpt from the Convention Preamble. Next, RA 9710 or Magna Carta of Women Act of 2009. This Magna Carta conveys framework of rights for women based directly on international law. So ito naman yung ating version ng Pilipinas na nagsispecify ng mga nilalaman ng CEDAW. It is directly based on the international law. The Magna Carta of Women Act of 2009 is a comprehensive women's rights law to eliminate discrimination through the recognition, protection, fulfillment, and promotion of the rights of Filipino women, especially the marginalized. It is a commitment of the Philippine government, the local translation of the provisions of the CEDAW, particularly in defining gender discrimination, state obligations, substantive equality, and temporary special measures. It is the Philippine government's responsibility to take actions in order to end discrimination against women. The salient features of the Magna Carta. Number 1, 50-50 gender balance, increasing the number of women in the third-level positions in the government within the next 5 years, while the composition of women in all the levels of development planning and program implementation will be at least 40%. Number 2, mabigyan ng mga kababaihan ng leave benefits with pay. This is for women employees who undergo surgery caused by gynecological disorders. Non-discrimination in the field of military, police, and other similar services that include according the same promotional privileges and opportunities as their men counterpart, including pay increases, additional benefits, and awards based on competency and quality of performance. 4. Provision of equal access and elimination of discrimination in education, scholarships, and training. 5th, dignity of women. Non-discriminatory and non-derogatory portrayal of women in media and film. Interesting. And 6, equal status to men and women on the titling of the land and issuance of stewardship contracts and patents. Gender mainstreaming mandates, the Magna Carta for Women mandates all government offices, including government-owned and controlled corporations and local government units, to adopt gender mainstreaming as a strategy for implementing the law and attaining its objectives. Sa Tagalog kasi ang mainstreaming ay, ang ibig sabihin niyan, palilitawin, no? So, palilitawin ang gender issues o gender concerns ng mga government offices sa kanilang mga mandato, polisiya, at mga directions. Third, RA 8353 or the Anti-Rape Law of 1997. An act expanding the definition of the crime of rape, reclassifying the same as a crime against persons, amending for the purpose Act number 3815 as amended, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code, and for other purposes. Rape is a crime against persons. It is committed by a man, take note, by a man who shall have carnal knowledge of a woman under any of the following circumstances. Rape is also committed by any person who under any of the circumstances nabubulol ako, mentioned in the first paragraph or the previous slide, hereof shall commit an act of sexual assault by inserting his penis into another person's mouth or anal orifice or any instrument or object into the genital or anal orifice of another person. Rape is punishable by reclusion perpetua. Reclusion perpetua is 20 years, diba? Death penalty shall also be imposed if the crime of rape is committed with any of the following aggravating or qualifying circumstances. Other penalties na ini-impose ng batas sa mga nagkakasala dahil sa rape. Next, we have RA 7192 or Women in Development and Nation Building Act. This is an act promoting the integration of women as full and equal partners of men in development and nation building and for other purposes. The state recognizes the role of women in nation building and shall ensure the fundamental equality before the law of women and men. The state shall provide women rights and opportunities equal to that of men. To attain the foregoing policy, number 1, a substantial portion of official development assistance funds received from foreign governments and multilateral agencies and organizations shall be set aside and utilized by the agencies concerned to support programs and activities for women. Number 2, all government departments shall ensure that women benefit equally and participate directly in the development programs and projects of said department. So, kailangan may participation ang mga kababaihan sa mga activities and projects ng mga government agencies. At pangatlo, all government departments and agencies shall review and revise all the regulations, circulars, issuances, and procedures to remove gender bias therein. The National Economic Development Authority or NEDA shall primarily be responsible for ensuring the participation of women as recipients in foreign aid, grants, and loans. It shall determine and recommend the amount to be allocated for the development activity involving women. These are the 6 basic tasks of the NEDA para maisakatuparan ang Women and Development and Nation Building Act. Una, formulate and prioritize rural development programs and projects kung saan direktang makakatulong ito sa mga kababaihan sa rural or countryside. Include assessments of women involvement and the impact on women. Ensure active participation of women and women's organizations in the development programs. Collect sex disaggregated data and include such data in its program and project paper, proposal, or strategy. Ensure or design programs and projects whose assistance to women is proportionate to their participation, and assist women in activities that are of critical significance to their self-reliance and development. In simple terms, the National Economic Development Authority must ensure that women benefits from development and also participates in the process of it. Equality in capacity to act. Women shall have the capacity to borrow and obtain loans and execute security and credit arrangement under the same conditions as men. So, kailangan nakakautang din sila kagaya ng mga counterpart nilang kalalakihan. Women shall have access to all government and private sector programs granting agricultural credit, loans, and non-material resources and shall enjoy equal treatment in agrarian reform and land resettlement programs. Women shall have equal rights to act as incorporators and enter into insurance contracts, and married women shall have rights equal to those of married men in applying for passports, secure visas, and other travel documents without need to secure the consent of their spouses. Interesting. Other provisions of the law. Equal membership in clubs, admission to military schools, and voluntary pag-ibig, GSIS, and SSS coverage. So, for women or girls out there who have always wanted to join the military, alam nyo, protektado kayo ng batas. Our laws ensure or protects or guarantees that you can join the military anytime you want at walang pumipigil sa inyo. RA 7877 or Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995, an act declaring sexual harassment unlawful in the employment, education, or training environment and for other purposes. By the way, if I'm not talking, that's the time that I'm giving you to read the slide. Sexual harassment is committed by an employer, employee, manager, supervisor, agent of the employer, teacher, instructor, professor, coach, trainer, or any other person who having authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another in a work or training or education environment. Take note: work, education, and training environment. Demands, requests, or otherwise requires any sexual favor from the other regardless of whether the demand, request, or requirement for submission is accepted by the object of said act. So it can only be committed according to this law by the following persons. Kaya later on na-revise na tong batas na to kasi hindi limitado yung mga pwede pala nating kasuhan ng sexual harassment. Mamaya, pag-uusapan natin yung bagong batas. Sa work, sexual harassment is committed when the sexual favor is made as a condition in the hiring or in the employment, re-employment, or continued employment of said individual. So kapag humihingi ng sexual favor para sa iyong patuloy na pagtatrabaho, that's sexual harassment. 2. The above acts would impair the employee's rights or privileges under existing labor laws. O kaya naman, kapag hindi mo siya pinagbigyan, mapuputulan ka ng mga karapatan at privileges na ibinibigay sa lahat ng empleyado. At pangatlo, the above acts would result in an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment for the employee. O kaya naman mahaharas ka talaga kasi hindi mo pinagbigyan yung boss mo. So, you should know your rights, girls. Sa mga education and training environments naman, it is committed when against the one who is under the care, custody, or supervision of the offender. Against one whose education, training, apprenticeship, or tutorship is entrusted to the offender. Number 3, when the sexual favor is made a condition to the giving of a passing grade or the granting of honors and scholarships or the payment of a stipend, allowance, or other benefits, privileges, or consideration. Interesting. And number 4, when the sexual advances result in an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment for a student, trainee, or apprentice. So, alamin nyo itong mga to kasi mag-OJT kayo, or kaya nasa school tayong lahat. So, dapat alam niyo na kapag itong mga to ay na-commit or any of these 4, pwede kang magsampa ng kaso ng sexual harassment. Duty of the employer or head of office. Responsibilidad ng employer or head of office to prevent or deter the omission of acts of sexual harassment within the jurisdiction of the company. The employer must promulgate appropriate rules and regulations in consultation with jointly approved by the employees or students or trainees. So, responsibilidad ng institusyon na magkaroon ng grievance committee, sexual harassment committee, na maglilitis sa mga kaso ng sexual harassment sa isang opisina, eskwelahan, or training. Number 2, create a committee on decorum and investigation of cases on sexual harassment. Penalties: any person who violates the provisions of this act shall, upon conviction, be penalized by imprisonment of not less than 1 month nor more than 6 months, or a fine of not less than 10,000 pesos nor more than 20,000 pesos, or both such fine and imprisonment at the discretion of the court. Any action arising from the violation of the provisions shall be prescribed in 3 years. Next, we have RA 9262 or Anti-Violence Against Women and Children and Their Children Act of 2004. an act defining violence against women and their children, providing for protective measures for victims, prescribing penalties therefore, and for other purposes. Violence against women and their children refers to any act or a series of acts committed by any person against a woman who is his wife, former wife, or against a woman with whom the person has or had a sexual or dating relationship. So hindi lang dahil kasal kayo, kahit dating pa lang kayo, pwede kang magsampa ng violence against women kapag sinaktan ka ng kadate mo, or with whom he has a common child, or against her child whether legitimate or illegitimate, within or without the family abode, which result in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering, or economic abuse including threats of such acts, battery, assault, coercion, harassment, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty. Types of violence but not limited to these: physical violence, psychological violence, kasama dyan yung intimidation, harassment, stalking, damage to property, public ridicule or humiliation, repeated verbal abuse, and mental infidelity. Mag-ingat sa mga nagsustalk dyan, ha? Sexual violence, act which is sexual in nature, and economic abuse, acts that make or attempt to make a woman financially dependent. Wow, interesting, no? Kapag pala ginagawa mong dependent yung asawa mo, yan ay economic abuse. Dapat binibigyan mo siya ng economic freedom na magtrabaho at maghanap buhay. Other terms defined from the law: battery, battered woman syndrome, stalking, dating relationship. Sexual relations, safe place or shelter, dating relationship, acts of violence against women and their children: causing physical harm to the woman or child, threatening to cause the woman or her child physical harm, attempting to cause the woman or her child physical harm, placing the woman or her child in fear of imminent physical harm. So kapag kahit tinatakot mo lang, vow na yan. Attempting to compel or compel the woman or her child to engage in conduct which the woman or her child has the right to desist from. So, halimbawa, pinapasayaw mo sila, that's actually violence against women. Inflicting or threatening to inflict physical harm on oneself for the purpose of controlling her actions or decisions. Causing or attempting to cause the woman or her child to engage in any sexual activity which does not constitute rape by force or threat of force, physical harm, or through intimidation directed against the woman or her child or her or his immediate family. Engaging in purposeful, knowing, or reckless conduct personally or through another that alarms or causes substantial emotional or psychological distress to the woman or her child. Kaya dapat inaalagaan ng mga husbands yung kanilang wives at yung kanilang anak. Hindi yung nagte-threat, hindi yung tinithreat sila, nag-inflict ng physical harm, or nag-attempt na mag-engage into sexual activity which they have the right to desist from, etc. Causing mental or emotional anguish, public ridicule, or humiliation to the woman or her child, including but not limited to repeated verbal and emotional abuse, and denial of financial support. Take note, ha? Denial of financial support or custody of minor children of access to the woman's child or children. So, if you or you know anyone who has been a victim of the following acts of violence against women and their children, please break your silence and report immediately to the police or to the Women and Children's Desk of your barangay. Huwag kayong matakot. And finally, ito na yung last, no? RA 11313 or the Safe Spaces or Bawal Bastos Act of 2009. It is an act defining gender-based sexual harassment in streets, public spaces, online workplaces, and educational and training institutions, providing protective measures and prescribing penalties therefore. So, sinabi ko kanina na yung Sexual Harassment Act limitado sa work, education at training environment. Itong bagong batas na to na 2019 lang, mas malawak yung coverage niya ng pambabastos. Kasama na dyan ang mga kalye, public spaces o parks, online workplaces at mga iba-iba pang mga institusyon. The Bawal Bastos Law penalizes catcalling or yung pambabastos sa mga babae sa kalye, whistling on a woman, misogynistic and homophobic slurs, yung pambabastos na gamit ang mga jokes, unwanted sexual advances, diba? Paghawak ng butt or touching of the boobs inside a jeepney, and other forms of sexual harassment in public places, workplaces, schools, as well as in online spaces. By the way, kasama pala yung mga kasama dito lahat ng mga public spaces kung saan nabastos ang isang babae. Safe spaces only used to mean private property before, pero the new Safe Spaces Act expands them even further to public spaces like streets, malls, and even in cyberspace. Pinasa pala ito ni Senator Risa Hontiveros under President Duterte's administration. Yung lumang batas kasi, only persons in authority could be charged as offenders. There are no provisions for harassment by subordinates or peers. Pero sa bagong batas, kapag yung kapwa mo nagtatrabaho o yung coworker mo nag-sexually advance sa'yo, pwedeng-pwede mo na siyang kasuhan ng Safe Spaces Act. So hindi na lang boss, employer, or coach, kundi maging ang iyong colleague, co-worker, o kapantay mo sa trabaho, pwede mo na ring kasuhan. Anyone can be an offender. Public spaces where you are now protected according to the Safe Spaces Act: streets, alleys, public parks, schools, buildings, malls, bars and restaurants, transportation terminals, public markets, spaces used as evacuation centers, government offices, public utility vehicles like jeepneys, as well as private vehicles covered by app-based transport network services, at other recreational spaces such as but not limited to cinema halls, theaters, and spas. Maging ang gender-based online sexual harassment ay pinipenalize din ng bagong batas. It uses information communication technology to frighten the victims, no? Yung mga online sexual harassment. So, ito yung mga uri ng panghaharas online na pwede mong i-report citing this Safe Spaces Act. So, maging recording or sharing any of the victim's photos, videos, or information without permission, yan ay kakasuhan ka ng Safe Spaces Act. Posting lies about the victims to harm their reputation. Tignan niyo yan, no? And filing false abuse reports to online platforms to silence victims. Medyo malawak-lawak talaga yung kino-cover ngayon ng bagong batas na to. Who oversees the implementation? Ito yung mga ahensya kung saan ka pwede mag-report. Siyempre, LGU na malapit sa'yo o kung taga saan ka, na dapat nilolocalize nila itong batas na to. DILG or Department of Interior and Local Government, PCW o Philippine Commission on Women, at DICT o Department of Information and Communications Technology, lalo na sa mga cyber and online complaints. Alright, that ends my presentation. I hope marami kayong natutunan o napulot man lang tungkol sa inyong mga karapatan, parusa sa mga nagkakasala at mga batas na pumoprotekta sa karapatan ng mga kababaihan. I am not a lawyer by profession. I can read and understand a law, but I am not in the position to interpret and to interpret a law. Okay, because I am not a judge or justice. I tried my best to discuss this, but of course my knowledge is limited to the social science side of things. So, usaping legal kasi ito. So, medyo binawasan ko yung aking mga adlibs. Alright, so maraming salamat sa pakikinig. Sana marami kayong natutunan and thank you very much. Meron pang isang lecture.